And now I am pleased to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. Jim Lockard.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Am I on? Okay, I can't tell. So, sometimes you think you're on and you're not. Does that ever happen to you? First, I want to hand this to my talented assistant, Jenny, who's going to read the quotes when they come up on the screen, so I don't have to turn my back on you. I just want to say thank you to Reverend Brian for having me here. I've known Reverend Brian for about 12 years, I think, now. And he's the kind of person to make quite an impression on you when you meet him. Huh? But I've really seen him grow and mature into, now he's considered one of the leaders of our movement. So I think, I hate to hear people say you're lucky to have him here, but you're lucky to have him here. It's your good consciousness that drew him in. That's what we believe. So our theme for this month is accountability, and the monthly themes come from the Centers for Spiritual Living Organizational Design Manual, which is something that was created when we were putting the two organizations into one, and we revisited our core values and so forth. So the values each month come from that document, and I was part of the team that put together sort of the monthly themes and solicited ministers up from all over the field to write up something for each week. So part of the purpose of doing this is to help us all, wherever we happen to be, sort of become aware of and choose to commit to the basic values of the organization. I changed my title a little bit from the format of the month. Instead of the courage to do the right thing, I made it the courage to change. Because I noticed that, we all know what the right thing is, pretty much. We all want to do the right thing. But to get to the point where we do the right thing on a really consistent basis might require some change. Because maybe right now we don't. I know as I was doing that affirmation that was up as part of the reading, I was thinking, oh God, I don't do that always. I let people in traffic if I'm not in a hurry. Or the last person that cut in front of me didn't piss me off too much. Or I don't have a vendetta against this person from about 5 miles back down the road, and I've been watching them, Of course, I lived in LA for 10 years, so, traffic there is a blood sport. But no, I think that it takes courage to change, to move closer to being accountable, to recognize we can give lip service to the idea of, yes, I'm accountable for what happens in my life. I think there's a little confusion in metaphysical teachings when people say you create your own reality. I think that's true, but it's not universally true in that I don't create everything that's happening in the world I happen to be living in. Okay, right now, this community is a creation, a co-creation of the various people that are here now that have been here in the past. No one individual is completely accountable for all of it. But we are completely accountable for our experience of things and for our responses and reactions. And there's a two-step process. One is awareness, becoming aware that I am accountable, because I grew up being told in a lot of things I wasn't accountable. Not necessarily directly, but by the behavior of people that I was trying to model, by the behavior of my parents and my teachers and my bosses and my coaches, who weren't always perfectly accountable themselves. Did anyone ever blame someone else for something? That's an example, okay? I like to say to people, who's the matter with you today? Well, so-and-so did this to me or did this and they shouldn't do that. Well, yeah, but they did it. So what are we going to do about that, see? So I think a first step in that recognition, in that awareness, is recognizing that to get where we want to get in our own experience of life, something's got to change. And that something has to be within us, a greater commitment to our own good. because Spirit can only do for us what Spirit can do through us. See? So as I, last night and this morning, offered up affirmative prayers for London, for example, I know that there's only so much I can do about that, but the fact that I can realize a greater truth on their behalf is of benefit in some way that I don't fully understand, but I trust. You see? On the other hand, I don't look at the fact that terrorism and things like that exist in the world as a personal spiritual failure of mine. But I am accountable for how I interact in the world in regard to things like that. Do my social media postings contribute to a greater consciousness or a lesser consciousness? My point exactly. You see. So we can laugh about it. God, thank God we can laugh. I do believe that Spirit, God, whatever term you want to use, does have a sense of humor. Because, look at this. Is this the work of a serious artist? Not really, okay. And as I age, it gets worse. But the point is that we can laugh about it, but let's use our humor to take us in a direction of being lighter in relationship to the world around us, being lighter in terms of how we hold other people accountable versus how we hold ourselves accountable. That's the problem in traffic, by the way. You just kind of edged into somebody else's lane and they blew their horn at you, but oh, come on, just give me a break. It was an accident. I didn't mean to do that. And somebody edges into your lane, that was intentional. You planned that from the moment you were getting up shaving at 7 o'clock this morning to come and cut me off. See, we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and we don't give the same benefit of the doubt to others so many times. When I do it, it's a mistake. When you do it, it's intentional. See? So let's look at the first quote. Oh, I have the thing, don't I? No, but it appeared. You did it. Okay.
I don't think this...
Tom Robbins said, real courage is risk... You read that, Jenny. It was just a mistake.
I don't think it's on. Wait a minute. Real courage...
Is her mic on?
Now it is.
Now it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Real courage is risking something that might force you to rethink your thoughts and suffer change and stretch consciousness. Real courage is risking one's cliches.
Was anyone around for the election that we had in this country last year? And I don't want to get into right, wrong, or anything else. I just want to get into what are some of the dynamics that have arisen out of that. Not that we're not created by it, but we're awakened by it. You see, how many of us, whether we liked the result or not, found that we had a lot of enemies that we didn't know we had before? And we labeled them clearly as enemies or as some people with some severe deficiencies in consciousness of one kind or another. And see, the point is not even if that's accurate or not. The point is, at what cost to yourself do you hold those views? At what emotional cost to yourself do you trigger the caustic, acidic, bodily functions that go with anger and being upset at others and holding others accountable for being wrong? You see. We need health care more than ever because people are going to get sick from this. This is what makes you ill, is the consciousness of negativity and fear and anger that releases various peptides and other things into your system that ultimately do damage to elements of your physical being. The body is a reflection of the emotional consciousness, you see. Am I accountable for how I react and respond to people with different opinions than mine, or different beliefs than mine, or people that say and do things that I find offensive? Do I see any accountability for myself in how I design and make choices for the kinds of reactions and responses I will have to that? Or do I turn myself over to their mercy? Because until they stop, I won't be better. See, if you're waiting for the world to be better so you can be happy, you're going to wait a long time. You see, we have to make different choices about how we respond to the world. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, said, those who think that if they had been God, they would have created a better universe are not even worthy of enlightenment. The world is what it is. Your job is not to fix it. Your job is to learn to live in it. That's a hard spiritual lesson. And it's even harder because, I don't know if you've noticed, but the average person on the street or in the media doesn't think that way. We get projection of anger and despair all over the place. And what we do is we tune into the media that kind of gives us the least amount of dissonance. In other words, that we agree with. Often, when I was in ministry full time, people would come and say, I'm so happy I found this place. I agree with everything you say. And I say, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that. I'll consider that a personal failing on my part. Because I don't learn from what I agree with. I learn from what upsets me and what knocks me off balance from time to time. And I don't want to be in that all the time, but I do want to recognize that it's the dissonance that allows me to change from something that isn't working to something that is. We don't grow from comfort. Do you ever get a new Barca Lounger or a Lazy Boy and you're sitting in it, and you drop the TV changer? And you don't want to get out of that chair because it's so comfortable, you see? And you wouldn't get out of the chair if you didn't need a beer. So it's the discomfort that gets you up out of that comfortable chair and gets you nourished, positively or negatively. You see? Let's look at the next quote. Oh, I can do it now. Okay, this is part one of this quote.
When we encounter those who have been oppressed by a system that has always worked just fine for us, we have a conscious choice about whether we will make space in ourselves to receive the truth of their experience. Will we have the courage to listen with an open mind and to recognize ourselves in the other? Will we have the humility to admit that we have been living with harmful misconceptions and to change our course?
There's a lot of conversation today and a lot of, good conversation about looking at how are we treating our fellow human beings in our culture, in our society? How have we been perhaps misinformed about the history of some of our relationships and some of the ways that people have been treated? And how is that informing the way, the settled beliefs that maybe we haven't questioned, but that we begin to realize may have been harmful, may be harmful? How do we deal with that? And I don't think it's about beating ourselves up, if we find ourselves in the oppressor class. I don't think that's the answer. I think it's, can we love ourselves enough to open up to those that have been oppressed and to really authentically listen to their experience without holding them accountable to see things through our eyes. And just a quick example out of the news this week. Someone wrote an epithet on LeBron James, the basketball player's home. You may have seen it in the news. I heard one comment, well, he's so rich, why would that bother him? He's got it made in this culture. You see? Now, if you were to analyze, and this happened to be a white person that said that, go figure. But if you think about what's going on there, most of our behaviors are generated by our subconscious mind. Our subconscious mind is where we hold our beliefs. Those beliefs are built over time by thoughts, but for the most part, when I was growing up, I wasn't paying attention to what I was thinking. I was just living my life. And a lot of what I was putting into my subconscious mind was wrong, because the people that gave it to me were wrong. Not maliciously wrong, just ignorantly wrong. And there was no way they could have been right given their surroundings and their circumstances and where they were getting their information. So this isn't about making anyone else wrong. It's about realizing that when I'm wrong, I need to make a change and find out how to be right. Has anyone ever been wrong about anything? Yeah, a couple hands went up. So how does it feel to be wrong? When you're wrong, how does it feel? Anybody? Just say something. What's it feel? Yucky, uncomfortable? Yeah. All right, I'm going to correct you there. That's wrong. That's how it feels when you know you're wrong. Before you know you're wrong, being wrong feels just like being right. And that's the problem. I don't know. I'm just using common sense, man. Common sense is an accretion of mostly BS that we accumulated up to the age of 18. That's common sense. That's our worldview in general. And we're very rarely encouraged to really delve into and question that worldview in later life, unless you go into therapy or come to a place like this. See? And what we do is disrupt your patterns of belief and thinking so that you can recognize where you've been in error and heal that through thinking in a way that creates beliefs that are supportive of a greater truth. And we never fully arrive. We never become completely right about everything. Ask my wife. You see. So,
you cannot hope to grow spiritually unless you are prepared to change. Those changes may come in small ways to begin with, but as you move further and further into the new, they will become more drastic and vital. Sometimes it needs a complete upheaval to bring about a new way of life.
And then there's a second part to this.
But it is amazing how soon you can get used to change as long as you have the courage and conviction that the changes which are in place are all for the very best. Let perfection always be your aim. Keep stretching. Keep reaching up to the seemingly impossible. Keep growing in wisdom and understanding, and never at any time be content to remain static. There is always something new and wonderful to discover in this life, so expand your consciousness and your imagination to make room for it. Keep open and receptive so you miss nothing.
And I think probably most of us, if not all of us, would look at that and say, yeah, that makes sense. I agree with that in general. But see, there's these points in terms of our own development where we rub up against our comfort, where we rub up against our fear, where we rub up against some beliefs that even though we may realize they're wrong, we feel they're somehow connected to our own security. You see, that's why it takes courage to make these kinds of changes, because you're facing yourself in ways that are probably not going to be very comfortable. And where, to be honest, most people kind of say, okay, that's kind of where I'm stopping. Remember, my own teacher in this teaching, a fellow named Dr. Bill Tolliver, who I studied with for a number of years, used to say, I've had people in this church for 30 years, and they still have the same problem they came in with, because they have only accepted the teaching at the very surface level. They've learned the vocabulary, but they haven't done the deep inner, significantly difficult work of revealing the uncomfortable parts of themselves. They haven't trusted the process enough to go into that place of discomfort. See, we talk about spiritual community being a safe space. I write about this in my book. And I think it's important that we recognize that safe space doesn't mean a place where you don't feel uncomfortable. It means a place where you can feel uncomfortable in a supportive environment. where you're not going to be criticized for revealing the discomfortable parts, uncomfortable parts of yourself, where you're going to be supported and nurtured through a process of self-growth that may be somewhat painful, at least elements of it. Because we've all got stuff that we've accepted as true that isn't true, that we are somehow emotionally attached to. So positive thinking in and of itself, while an essential step in personal growth, is not adequate for personal transformation. I can do affirmative prayers till the cows come home, but if I'm not willing to change my mind, all I'm doing is saying some words. I have to be willing at depth. It's called having an open will. Because our will, that we call it the egoic self, but that will is bound to protect whatever you currently believe. And we even manipulate our senses. So we'll see things that affirm what we believe. Two people can look at the same thing, and one can see one thing and one can see another. Because we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are in the moment. So, I don't know how to make that clean, so I won't use it. Okay, I can do it. Somebody said, if you run into a jerk in the morning, you ran into a jerk. But if you run into jerks all day, you're a jerk. Because we're projecting our own sense of self onto other people all the time. And if we see everybody is screwed up, see, that's where the finger needs to point back at us. What am I seeing from? What am I seeing from? So let's see what somebody else has to say.
Having a soft heart in a cruel world is courage, not weakness.
When we're in fear, we tend to think we need to get rigid and toughen up. You know, we're on guard. Let them come. Build up the inner Department of Defense. You have an inner Department of Defense? Okay, it's always sending out reconnaissance to see what everybody's up to and what your enemies are doing and who's going to try to take advantage of me now. That 7-Eleven clerk's not getting away with it again. Do you see the way she looked at me during the collection today? I'll get her. See? One of the great philosophers, I forget his name at the moment, said you can tell the quality of a culture by the amount of its resources that go into the arts and things of beauty, as opposed to the amount of resources that go into war. Look at our culture. The resources that we put into defense. In defense, I would add, this is a personal statement of opinion. It may not reflect the views of the management. Defending against a world we don't understand. And we're going to shut down the National Endowment for the Arts and the Humanities in order to fund more of the Department of Defense. What if your life was just being on the defensive? What if you were always feeling threatened? And some people are, by the way. What would be the quality of that life? It takes no courage to build up your Department of Defense. Fear alone will drive you to do that. It takes courage to have a soft heart in a world where that doesn't appear to be valued. And a soft heart simply means I'm open to the possibility that I have misjudged you. I am open to the possibility that the good in you has somehow eluded my perception. Abraham Lincoln once said, I met a man today and I didn't like him. I'm going to have to talk to him more. See. Now, none of us are going to do this perfectly. Any perfectionists in the room? I know, don't put your hand up. I would argue, I didn't mean you. It's not all about you, Brian. I would argue that there's no such thing as a perfectionist. That what we call a perfectionist is really an imperfectionist. The first thing they see is what's wrong. Their attention is immediately to, oh, you're missing a button. Oh, you're going to go out like that? You've got a spot on your shirt. Or whatever, you see. And we know that when that perfectionism goes to extremes, it becomes extremely debilitating. Now, the opposite of that is not caring. The opposite of that is having a relationship with the world around you that allows for the world to be as it is. You see, perfectionism is a fear of my own inadequacy that I project onto the objects around me and other people around me, because then I don't have to think about my own stuff. So again, it takes no courage to be a perfectionist. And it takes, and perfectionists rarely have a soft heart. Can't stand it, can't stand it. You know. I used to, like many of you, I used to be a police officer. For 24 years, and I worked partly in Ocean City, and then I went down to Dade County, Florida, because why not? And I had for a while there was a lieutenant I worked with, and he got assigned to the training bureau where I was currently assigned, because he was just really irritating to people out on the road. So let's find him an administrative job. So they put him in the training bureau, and he's in charge of the secretarial pool, which we called at that time, which was about 12 women, all happened to be Cuban American, it was in Miami, who, you remember the old big WordStar systems with the big plastic discs about this big, they would do the initial word processing, and they would turn out the voluminous papers of the training bureau. And he looked around and he said, these women, they had personal items and photos and stuffed animals and plants on their desk. He said, this is very inefficient. I don't like the looks of this. So as of Monday, you can have no personal items on your desk. And they're like, what? He goes, yes. And Monday morning came in, and the desks were all completely bare. And as the week went on, we began to notice something. Nothing was getting done. They were all typing away like mad, but they were making a million mistakes and losing files, you see. And the major, who was the commander of the unit, who I really had a lot of respect for, I went in his office and said, you kind of aware of what's going on out there? He goes, yeah, what's going on? What happened? I told him, and he didn't know. I said, well, Lieutenant made them get rid of all their personal stuff. He goes, what an idiot. Doesn't he know that these women run the place? That if you make them upset that nothing, we know that, we've known that for years, You'd think a normal human being would know something like that. But it was his own sense of perfectionism, see? So the commander went out, told them to bring their stuff back in, everything went back to normal, and the lieutenant got transferred somewhere else. It's civil service, there's nothing you can do about it but transfer them somewhere, Who hasn't had them yet? It was that kind of thing. But see, that perfectionism was about his need to affect his world in a way that he was unwilling to do his inner work and affect his own inner thoughts and things, which must have been tortuous. I wouldn't want to be him. He was not a happy person. People that are that obsessive are not happy. And you're obsessive because of fears that haven't been addressed within yourself. You see? Ernest Holmes got that. Ernest Holmes said, pay attention to the good in your life. If it's not there now, invite it in. It's waiting for you to say yes, which is really kind of an interesting thing. That might be the last quote. Oh, no, that's not.
And this is a Jim Lockard quote, right?
Yeah.
The persistent application of love through the teaching of accountability is ultimately irresistible.
Now, this is the Queen of Hearts, you may know from the Alice in Wonderland story. And I put her up there because she's irresistible. whatever she wants done. She's a powerful force in her world, which is a topsy-turvy, crazy world, I'll admit, but so is ours, right? And she is a force that is to be reckoned with. Are you a force to be reckoned with in your own world? And are you a healthy force or an unhealthy one? Because you can be either. We're an unhealthy force to be reckoned with when we're out of alignment with who we really are. But when we come into alignment with our true self, and our true self is the awakened version of us. Our true self has a soft heart. Our true self is loving and wise and curious about the world. And when we come into greater alignment with that, we become a healthy force, a contributing force to a better world, regardless of where we act. We don't have to find a big platform and affect thousands of people. We can raise one child brilliantly, or be a comfort to other people around us who are doing their own work. See, Holmes said in the textbook, he said, it does not matter when you die if anyone ever knew you lived. What matters is that you lived well. You see? So it's not about fame and fortune. How many of us sell our souls trying to get fame and fortune? You don't see many people gaining their soul by getting fame and fortune. That should tell you something. You see, life leaves clues. What works? Who are the happiest people? Find some happy people in your life. Maybe you'll have to meet some new ones. But find some happy people and kind of figure out what makes them tick. And by happy, I mean satisfied, fulfilled, curious, and interesting. Not happy because they just cut somebody off back down the road. That's not happy. Happy is where you're in alignment with who you came here to be. Are you being the person you came here to be?
Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire.
The first Christian pyromaniac was St. Catherine of Siena. And a pyromaniac in the best sense. See, one thing a lot of us don't understand about saints, and this is not so much true today anymore as it was back in the Middle Ages. There was a saying that woe be to the bishop who has a saint in his parish, because the saints would drive you crazy. The saints were more tuned into the teaching than the bishop. The bishop was taken care of, unless the bishop was a saint too. But most saints don't get appointed to administrative positions. You see? So the saint would be the one that's saying, hey, we're not taking care of the poor people. Hey, we're not doing this. We could be doing better. We could be. And then the bishop's like, get away from me. You see? And you couldn't become a saint until you'd been dead 40 years. Because you had a lot of enemies when you were alive. You see? But if you still had a fairly good reputation after 40 years and they could prove a miracle or two in their standards, you became a saint. So a saint was the dynamic nudge. Who are you to think we're being good Catholics? See? So I'll just close with this statement, and I'll do a prayer. If you were arrested and charged with being a religious scientist, would there be enough evidence to convict you? So know this with me. I stand here in joy, opening up within my heart an invitation to all the good that the universe can provide, because the universe never withholds. I let go of any limiting ideas of self or others. I let go of any need for the world to look a certain way. And instead, I embrace a new possibility that is a dynamic, changing process where every moment is new. Every moment is recognized by me as filled with potential and possibility. I forgive myself for any transgressions in the past. I make amends where necessary, but I move forward with a clean consciousness. And I step into a mindset that expects only the best. I invite the good into my life. I invite my own realization of what is already so. I am a giving being in a giving universe. I am part of the divine flow. So I say yes. I say yes to a greater idea. I say yes to forgiveness of myself and others. I say yes to the fuller realization of a great truth of my being, that I am, here and now, fully present, fully engaged, fully in love with myself and with all of life. I bring a good consciousness to every element of my life. I stand with courage, which is the bravery of the heart. I refuse to engage in that which diminishes myself or others. And I embrace my capacity to help others simply feel better about who they are. So with great gratitude, I accept this truth into my life, and I release this word lovingly into that creative field that we call mind, knowing it is done unto me as I believe, and together we say,
and so it is. Amen.
Thank you.